Thanks for the quick introduction, Matthias, and welcome everyone in this presentation. My name is Arnaud Mélinger. I'm a motion designer at Motion Factory and I've been working for the past 5 years in Montreal, Canada. I first started as a motion designer at Moment and then I quickly became a team lead, and then since the beginning of 2021 I'm a CG supervisor for the team of the motion design. Being a CG supervisor gives me the opportunity to showcase to you a bit more what we do behind the scene, and one of the best ways to explain the type of project that we do is just to launch the latest demo reel that we have for the content team. As you've seen in this video, we are never going to do projects that are going to be seen in a normal screen, for example, a TV or a computer screen, or neither a cell phone. What we do is that every project is based on the installation and the location that we're doing it. So we need to build every time a new template that's going to be used to take our content, split it between the different screen or the different projector, and just showcase it the best way. One example that I have regarding that type of template and how it looks is the project that we've done in New York, I think in 2019, that's called Super Real. It's an installation in which you are walking inside of a gigantic room and you have projection on all the walls around you and also on the roof. So it's like almost 360-degree projection, and you are really close from the walls, but not from the ceiling, of course. But it gives you that feeling of being inside of the media that we've been doing at Motion Factory. To do that and to be able to have a nice enough render, we need to output a gigantic number of pixels. So for example, you're used to doing 1080p. It's 1920 by 1080. It's something that most TV can have now, and also most cell phones. But if we crop the render of Super Real to a 1080p window, that's how it looks. And it's already nice, but and a lot of works, but when we do the full render of it, that's what it looks like. It's 22K by almost 3K resolution. And all those parts that you see on the video right now are gonna be cut, projected in different walls, and also bend and kind of warp to fit the ceiling and the different details. The fact that we have to render those big images makes us work kind of differently. We need to be able to be as fast as possible when we have modification, when we arrive on site and we need to make quick adjustment. One of the best features that we use from Cinema 4D to be able to do that as fast as possible is, I think it's been there for the past 3 or 4 years, it's called render token and render passes. Let me jump right in Cinema 4D. That's the project that we're gonna talk about, that is Soul of the Ocean. That's what a template is looking like. We need to split the different surfaces from the building and being sure to project them the right way. But if I look at my render setting right now, this is the output that I need to make. It's almost 10K on 3K height. I can't work all the time with that resolution. So what I need to do first is being able to create a new child of that, and for example, making it half resolution. And to make it half, it's super easy. I can use any type of multiplication or division, and I can just divide by 2. It's not exactly half res because of the way the pixels are split, but I can also do something even smaller, just in case. I can do a quarter resolution. And that quarter resolution, of course, I'm gonna divide by 4 my height and my width. So right now I already have something that is easier to work with, because I will be able to work with full resolution when I need it, and also just switch to something else all the time. So that's the first step of that project. We need to build those render settings. Then I need to output the file I'm gonna work with in a specific folder. For that, we have an amazing team of pipeline and technical director that made a lot of script for us, one of them being custom render setting. And if I'm launching it, that's what I'm gonna see. I think it's a Python script that's gonna give me the exact position of the frame I need to render on the server. So all of that integration is thanks to us using Shotgun, that is something made by Autodesk to kind of implement the hierarchy of folder inside of the project, and also being able to do review online and everything. So we use ShotGrid, which is the new name of Shotgun, a lot, and that's what's gonna be able to be used for the Python script to give me the precise location of everything. So that script is made by us, and I need to change the full res. I want to maintain that ratio. I want stuff to be outputted in element and not in out, and I can output a single frame for now. If I'm applying that to my render setting, what I can see is that right now, if I go to File, Save, it's gonna have that exact right position on the server, so I don't even need to think about it as an artist. It's gonna be exactly where I need it to be. And what is nice with the fact of having render settings that are inheriting stuff from parents is that even if I didn't touch it yet, my half res and my quarter res are having exactly the same render location. So that's fine. Then I know that my project is made using Arnold renderer, so I'm just gonna switch my renderer on the full res to Arnold. And once again, it's gonna change it for everything else under it. And now I will be able to say that my full res is gonna be with those settings. For example, it's really not an Arnold tutorial right now, but I will be able to change the half res settings to even, I already changed the size of it, but I can also change the samples. So for example, I'm gonna switch to everything to half, and you might guessed it, I'm gonna do the same with the quarter res to switch everything to just, well, I say one camera and one everything else. So already without doing anything, I have a full render setting that's gonna be looking good, but it's gonna take a lot of time. I have an half render that is gonna be way faster and half the size, and a quarter res that's just gonna help me build my file as I need them. Then what I could do is, for example, just putting an Arnold light, just a simple point light, up right here. It's not gonna be beautiful, but it's gonna be understandable for everyone. And I'm gonna switch to that window right here on the right corner that's called Take. What you need to do is always work on the main take. Everything that you do, you need to be doing it on the main take, and that you can create a new child take that I'm gonna call F for full. And to that child take, I'm gonna assign the full res render setting. I'm gonna do the same with everything else, naming something H for half res, and naming something Q for quarter res. But the issue that I have right now is if I start rendering all of those takes one by one, my file is going to be having the same name 3 times and it's going to overwrite, and it's not going to be what I want. What I can do is, right now, my save output is made using render token. Render token are a way for Cinema 4D to just have automatically a name change to different type of setting. Now I'm using the project name, which is the name of my file right now, PMP workflow motion version 1, and I'm outputting the picture as the same name. That's super useful because in 5 months, a year, 2 years, when I need to update that project, for example, for a new scene or anything, I will know directly which file made that specific render. So it's super useful to use the project name as a way to track the file that you are doing. But right now I'm gonna go to the full, and what I'm gonna do is just inside of the first folder that I'm creating with that $project, I'm gonna just use F. Create a new folder called F. That's gonna give me that name. Then I can do the same right here. Instead of F, I can do H. And instead of F in quarter res, I can do Q. Then of course, what I can add is also just an underscore, and being sure that depending on the project that I'm gonna be doing, maybe I don't need that, but I will add right here with the triangle, I will add my current take name. So it's $project, PRG, $take. And I'm just gonna copy this to every other output name. So it means that, for example, when I'm going to render the Q, the quarter res version, is going to be outputted inside of a Q folder and using my take name. Right now it's super simple and the name of the folder is the same name as the take, but maybe later inside of the project I will need to have different take names, and I will just need to know that they are made in quarter res, so it's going to be easier that way. So for example, what I can do is just selecting all those takes to be rendered, and what it means is that it's going to start with the one on the top, so the quarter resolution, the half resolution, and then the full res. I'm gonna do that, launch that in the background, and in the same time I'm gonna work with the file that we already have. What I usually do is that I launch the quarter res with a high priority inside of our render farm, and then I launch the full res with a really low priority, even like an overnight render, so I can have that in the morning the next day, or during the afternoon if I launch that soon enough. So I'm gonna use that button, which make all the rendered, it's gonna render all the takes that are marked to the picture viewer. And it's gonna render that file. And as you can see, my quarter res is already rendered, my half res is rendering right now, and my full res, because of the fact that I have bigger samples and a really bigger image, it's gonna take a bit more time. What I can do is right now jump in After Effects. I already have a comp at the right resolution, and I can just go where I'm supposed to have my renders, right here, and I can just drag and drop my quarter res to start working. Right now, of course, it's just one frame, so it's super fast, but imagine having, like for example, a huge animation of 30 or 60 frames per second. You're gonna have a lot of spare time to work with your quarter or your half res. Also, right now, of course, my scale is at 100%, but it's only covering a quarter of the resolution of my comp. That's normal. I could use a simple right-click, transform, and fit to comp, but what I'm gonna use is a really simple formula that I'm gonna copy paste. And that formula is really just looking at what my layer size is, looking at what my comp size is, and doing a quick ratio of that and outputting that inside of the scale itself. So every time I'm gonna update my render, I will be able to have the right resolution and the right size for everything. What I can do now is just doing my normal work, which is putting an adjustment layer, for example, color correction, I don't know, anything, curve, adjust what I need. And of course, my quarter res is gonna be super grainy and really problematic to work with, but I will already have something to deal. Now, if I'm looking at my Cinema 4D, it must have rendered, and yes, as you can see, it's taking 1 second to render the quarter res, 7 seconds for the half, and 1 minute and 23 seconds for 1 frame of the full res. And once again, it's just one light in Arnold with not a lot of stuff happening, so you can guess that sometimes we go kind of crazy and have a 10-minute frame per render. But right now, since I'm working with the quarter res and everything is working fine and I finally have my full res, I can go using immigration, which is a script that you can find on AfterEffectsScript.com, and I can just tell him, let's take a look at that folder and see what you can have. He's gonna find every iteration of my renders, and I can select the quarter res right here and select the half res over there and just replace it. And you're gonna see on the scale that it changed to an half res render. It's only 200% right now, and the render is already better quality. I can do the same once I have my final full res render. And now, of course, my scale is 100% and my render quality is way better. So that's a really simple setup. It's just one frame and it's just one render, but we're gonna see a bit later in that presentation how you could do that for way more takes and way more render tokens, and just use immigration to update quickly a full project really in a matter of seconds. But that's how we work for the base of every project. We try to make automation that's gonna help us along the way. Now let's just talk a bit more about that specific project, which is Soul of the Ocean. So Soul of the Ocean is the project using the template that you've just seen before. It's a project done in Hong Kong that we delivered at the end of 2019, and it's basically doing a full show of 22 minutes on the aquarium of the Ocean Park. It's really a weird shaped building, so that gives us the opportunity to create an animal inside of it that we called Anima, and that is going through different phases, transforming into different types of animals, and just evolving, doing a show with the dancers in front of it on the lake. The scene we're gonna focus on today is the one using the parrots that are gonna create some kind of line behind them all along the way. So as you see, it's a really huge project. It's 10K by 3K wide, and what we need to do first is just start working with smaller elements. We work with small stuff, we try to make them as procedural as possible, and then we go further inside of the template. So let's just open once again Cinema 4D and check that. I can just open a new file and go right here. We're gonna start with, of course, our small little parrots that are gonna create those particles. So it's just an Alembic that we bought online, and straight from the beginning I can see that it's a bit too slow, a bit having some issues on the feather. I don't need to have as much detail as that, just because I know that it's gonna be, even if it's a really huge projection, it's gonna be a really small parrot, a really small element. So I don't want my file to be having issues with that. So I'm just gonna switch to another version of that, which is really just the same parrot with less feather and the material with that are coming from the version that I had before. Right from the get-go, I can see that those materials are not normal. It's not normal that I don't see anything right now, and I am having issues with where the files are. So a really simple thing to do is opening the texture manager or the asset manager in the latest version of Cinema 4D and looking at that. My suggested path is not the right one. I know that all the files that are needed are inside that source image folder. So what I can do straight away is copying that path, pasting it right here, and search inside of that file path, for example, copying everything before source images, putting it in a replace, and from now on, if I select everything and I do a replace, all my elements are gonna be really linked, and now my material is doing something normal, which is showing me that body element and showing me all those feathers. I realize that I have two materials and only, well, one big element so far. So I'm just gonna put everything inside of a null, calling it parrot and not messing up with my namings. I'm gonna select everything with Control A, Control click to deselect parrot and putting all of it inside. So if I put my body material on that, it's working for the face, hooray, but on the feather I have a lot of issues. That's because I need to apply that material to them. So I'm just going to create another null object that I'm going to call feather. I'm going to put that inside of parrot, and I can go one by one, select everything that's named feather. It's going to take me a lot of time, so I'm just going to check in that quick research field over there. I'm going to check for the name feather. I'm gonna once again select everything, deselect the null object, putting that feather selection. No, just gonna select just the feather. It's not working if I'm doing a Control A, so I'm selecting manually all of those 71 elements and putting them inside of the feather null, and I'm applying the material to the null. So right now, I have my parrot with the right colors, and I can start working with it. So first thing first, what is it looking like? It's a simple animation where it's just one sequence of the loop itself. So the first thing I need to do is select everything with a middle mouse click, deselect my null object, and now I have my 79 elements, which are all alembics, and I can put the mode, instead of play, I'm going to put that in loop. So if I'm going back, I'm just going to give way more space for that. If I'm going back, now I have my parrot that is, well, flying. I have still one feather that I forgot to delete. That was bugging. But now it's working well. And I can start working right now in my idea, which is I'm gonna create a cloner using a spline to be able to direct all those parrots along the surface of the building. But to work easily at the beginning, I'm just gonna do a simple MoGraph cloner and putting that in a grid array, and I'm putting my parrot inside of it. It's a super small OBJ, so I'm just gonna, well, Alembic. So I'm just gonna change the size of everything for my object to be just, I think, 20 is enough. And for the sake of that presentation, I'm gonna lower the number of parrots to 2 on each thing. So right now I have 8 parrots that are inside of my cloner, that's fine, but it's super slow and super laggy when I'm playing it. That's because I think it's in my version of Cinema 4D, which is R20, it's not automatically switching the instance mode from instance to multi-instance, but as soon as I do that, my playback is way faster. And I think you can still work with the viewport mode, but right now it's way more than enough for what I need. So I'm gonna work in that simple cloner setup, and then I'm gonna put that on a spline and trying to do step by step to be sure that I'm not doing too many things at the same time. Right now, one of the issues that I have is that all the parrots are flying in the same speed, exactly the same speed, exactly the same moment. So the easiest way to change that is to keep that parrot, calling him 0. Then I'm gonna have 1, then I'm gonna call, well, 1. And inside that second parrot, I'm gonna select everything with a middle mouse click, deselect parrot and deselect feather, so I only have those 70 elements of Alembic. And what I could do is just offset those by, for example, I don't know, 5 frames. So now I already have 2 versions of my parrot that are offset in timing. I can do the same once again, making it parrot number 2. Select everything, deselect the null object, and just this time doing, for example, a 9 frame. I'm trying to use uneven numbers so I'm not having anything that is overlapping. And right now it's just those 3 versions of the parrot. I already have something that is way more believable. It's still can be seen that you are having the same instances of parrots going over and over, but we can add way more stuff inside of that. So cloner parrot, and just to change a bit everything, I'm gonna add an effector and a random one. Not for the position so far, it's really something that we're gonna work with a bit later in the presentation, but I'm gonna change the scale and change the uniform scale to, I don't know, 0.25. So you already have a bit more variation inside of those. Yep, it's already working fine. And I can start working right now with the idea of having a spline that's going along the way. I'm not gonna work on the template right now, I'm really just gonna work on something and doing stuff as we just create them. So I don't want a Bezier, I want a B-spline. I'm gonna try to have something that's looking from the top. Well, let's try to do something a bit tricky and trying to have the same kind of feeling that I'm gonna have inside of my project at the end. It's not like huge 90-degree turns, it's mostly that kind of feeling of following a spline, and then of course we're just gonna have a bit of change in the altitude of those parrots. So I'm trying to replicate that fast enough to just make the test while we talk. But if you feel confident that your idea is going to work, you can already try it inside of a template. But I mostly try to do that because first, well, the file is way smaller right now, so it's easier to work with. And then if I do something outside of the template and I make it procedural, it's going to work inside of the template. I just need to adjust it at the end. So right now I have my, how we can call that, course. And of course I'm going to rename that for the random size. So instead of having the grid array, I'm going to change that to object mode. And I'm going to ask the object to be not the cloner, but the spline itself. So right now I have my parrots that are going to be along the spline. And I think that by default the mode is count, which is nice. And it's just 10 parrots. Let's change that to, I don't know, 6, so it's easier for me. But if I'm doing what I think I'm going to do, which is an offset, they're going in the wrong direction. The simplest way is just to play with those values. And right now, in the transform of your cloner, you can have everything going in the right direction. Fine. What I can do also is thinking that they are in some kind of flock formation. So I'm going to put them all a bit closer, one from each other. And my setup is almost there. What I need to do is just make them go away from the beginning. I know that they are going to pop back over there, but don't worry. I'm just going to make them slowly go away. So they're all out. And then I'm going to animate. So they're going to go all the way to, well, let's go 100. So right now, how does it look? I have parrots coming from here in kind of a linear way. Well, the animation itself is not linear. I need to show the curve. It's a tangent, so I'm going to make it linear because I want them to fly at the same speed all the time, but they are all packed together. I can decide that with the end and start, just how much of them are separated. And I can also put that wonderful MoGraph effector, which is the push apart. So right now the value of the push apart is way too big. I think 20 is a good value for those parrots, maybe 10 even. So I have all of them going in the right direction, not bumping into each other, and I can change the random size to be a bit bigger, so 0.5. And because of the way my cloner is made, if my parrot is bigger, it's gonna need more space, but the push apart is gonna work that way exactly. So that's nice. It's already working fine. Everything is on the right thing, blah, blah, blah. What I can add to that setup also is having a bit more variety on the positioning of each of those elements. So I'm going to add a new random, being sure that it's applied to the cloner. And that random is going to be a random position. So the position itself, 50 is a bit too much. So once again, 10, 10, and 10. And that's without the cloner, that's width. So I have a bit more control on that, and I can make them spread away during their flight. So that's fine, but I still have one issue, which is if they arrive at the beginning like that, I'm gonna be able to see, of course, that they are not appearing from nowhere. So of course I'm gonna build my spline to be a bit more, to have some leeway at the beginning and at the end, but I can also do something really nice, and that's gonna give us a new opportunity to use another MoGraph effector, which is going to be a plane effector, and it's going to be the disappear. What I want with that specific effector is that I'm going to put the scale to -1. So it's making all the clone disappear, but I don't want it to affect all the flight, just the beginning and the end of my flight. So I'm going to add a fall off with a spherical field. And what it means is that they're just gonna disappear inside of that fall off. So as soon as they get out of the fall off, they're gonna slowly ramp up their size and go all the way. So that's fine. I can name it begin, and I'm gonna do another one that I'm gonna call. And what I want that to be able to do is just to follow the spline that they did. So right now, what I did is that I made that spline So what I can do is using the end and the beginning of my spline as a reference point. So I can add a line to spline. This one is going to be with the course, and it's going to have a 0% because it's the beginning. And I'm going to duplicate that, and this time put that at 100%, and it's going to be the end. So right now I have my parrots that are appearing out of nowhere and disappearing at the end of the flight. I need to make them a bit bigger. So right now, no parrot at the beginning. They slowly fly and then they disappear. And what is cool with that setup is that I can just change the course of my spline really simply, and all my parrots are going to follow. So my idea of having one setup that I'm going to do and then duplicate over time is working fine with that. And with this, we build the bigger part of the MoGraph. So now we're going to jump inside of the template to make the real render this time. So I can change file and go to the real template itself. And this is what we're going to use as a background for our flight of parrot. That's the animal at the beginning of the sequence that's waking up, and we're using the parrots to waking up. I'm not going to use the full object itself because it's a bit bigger compared to what we need. So I'm just going to copy some of the body parts, for example. So I'm just going to copy that group and go back to the first file that we did together, the workflow one. That's my template. That's how the building is really outputted inside of my After Effects file. And I'm just going to copy on top of that the wings. So right now, if I'm just getting the out of the building, that's what I have. I have those 3 wings that we're going to work with. And I'm just going to create a new material just for the sake of that presentation. Replace it with Alt so we don't have any issues with the textures. So I just copied those geometry and I want the parrots to fly in front of those big bird feather and just appear and disappear with this. So I'm going to work with one tail, which is this one, the middle one. I'm going to go back to what we did before. Put everything inside of a null. I'm going to call that middle wing. Go back here, copy and paste it inside of our project. Also, I'm going to save that file incrementally. So right now, if I'm doing any new render, it's not going to overwrite what we did with the take system right before. It's going to be named version 2. So first thing first, I need to change that spline to be something that's going along that wing. So I'm going to use my pen tool using the snap with some polygon snap, and I'm going to be creating just one simple. I try to make it as evenly spaced as possible, but because I'm using all the snapping, it's going to snap on my wing here, right here, right here, once again there, there, and as I told you, I'm going to try to make it end after that and maybe start also before. So I have something a bit wider than what I need. That's nice, and I'm gonna disable the snap. And if I'm looking at my scene from another camera, because I need to render it from the point of view if I want it to work with the projection mapping. But if I'm looking at that, it's nice, it's a bit too close from the wing right now. So I'm gonna change that, of course, to B-spline, so it's smoother. And if I try to put it in front of my wing, for example, so I'm gonna just move that in front because I want the parrot to fly right over there. If I go back in my render cam, everything is messed up. It's way too high, it's kind of problematic. So instead of moving it as I just did, I'm gonna control V. I'm gonna use a quick trigonometry trick, so to say. The easiest way to do that is just to change the center of the pivot point to be the same as my camera. So for example, if I'm putting that inside of the camera, I'm activating the enable axis modification and I'm changing the position right here. Just by doing this, my point of pivot is right here at the same position as my camera. And if I'm getting it out, because I don't need that, I'm gonna call that middle spline. changing this. Right now, if I'm changing the size of my spline, just because of the fact I did that with the center of pivot being at the same position as my camera, I'm moving it. You can see it right here, it's moving, but you don't see any modification here. It's just an optical and a trigonometry kind of trick in which right now our spline is in front of our wing and we can now use it for our system of parrots. So let's go back there. I'm gonna delete this one, I don't need it anymore. And I just need to be sure that I'm putting the new spline at every position for that. So I need the parrot to follow that spline, which is normal. And I also need those two align to spline to follow this. And right now, everything is way too small because of the size of the scene compared to the parrot that we had before. So I'm gonna go inside of that cloner and transform the size. I'm gonna click on the S, so it's selecting 3 of the sizes. And I think that if I output 10 times bigger and Control Enter, it's gonna put 10 as the right number. So now we can see them way more. And we also need to adjust, of course, the size of those two fields. I think that's 7. Even bigger. Let's go full 1000. And I realized that the beginning is a bit too far away, so I'm gonna change the position of it so it can fit right there. So I don't care over here, or I can just also change my spline itself and make it begin a bit more inside of that. So I don't care about that. I don't have any building over there, so even if I'm rendering something, it's not going to be shown. And now I have my parrots that are slowly appearing. That's why. And now they're just all going away. And it's just 200 frames. So same thing at the end, I can adjust the position of it, so it's making them disappear a bit better. So now, they're right here, they arrive, they fly. So I realize right now that my push apart is having some issues, like for example, if I put everything back on, I'll just changing position at every frame, I can just deactivate the push apart and make way more width inside of the random position. Oh. So I can just try to adjust everything so it's fitting a bit more. And once again, you can just play with those numbers. And right now, your parrots are not having a seizure every time they move. So that's fine. That's the first render that I need. It's those parrots as a beauty pass. So it's just going to be a normal render. I don't even need it to be an Arnold one, so I can just change that to standard, and everything under it is going to be changed to standard. And that's the first one I need to do. I need to make a parrot. So once again, I can just do a parrot Q, and I'm just going to do a parrot full. Parrot full. So now when I'm going to render, I just need to do this, and I will be able to just have my parrots being rendered first in quarter res and then in full resolution. Let's go back to the main take and see what we have. If I'm rendering a frame right now, I can see at the same time the parrot and the background. I don't want those wings to be seen, so I'm going to activate the auto take system. I'm going to go inside of the main one of the parrots, check it's still seen, and I'm just going to deactivate that. And right now, only for my parrot, I won't see anything more from that size. So that's fine, working for me. I can render my parrot at quarter res way faster, work with them, and then render the full res when I need it. That's one of the first parts that we're going to do. We're going to also do another one, which is the light impacts of the parrot on the building itself, on the wings itself. To do that, there's nothing complicated. We're just going to add a light to every one of our parrots. So I'm going to add a light over here, put that inside of the parrot, and reset the position. So that's the first one. Let's do another one. Parrot 1. Reset the position. If you don't have that button right over here, it's just Shift C to activate the search, and you can just do a reset PSR. I just added it to my view. So right now, all my parrots have a light inside of them, which is kind of poetic. And I'm gonna just do a new child take. That's gonna be light. I'm gonna work with it. The auto take is still activated, so I can just go there. I'm pushing Alt R to see an interactive viewport of the standard render. And what I want is to be able to see the lights, but not the parrots. One easy thing that I can do is just select all those lights, rename them, of course. I'm just gonna go back to the main take to be sure that my modifications are gonna be put in everything. So I'm gonna output that light middle. So that's fine, all the name changed. And now if I select all of them, I'm doing Shift C, and I'm gonna create a selection out of that. You cannot see it because it doesn't have the light inside of it. But right now, I have that new element that I can put inside of my middle wing. And anytime I need to go back to selecting all those lights, I can just double click the selection object, and I can have my 3 lights selected. It's gonna be way faster for me to do everything now. So what I want to do is inside of that light render, I don't want the beauty of the parrots because I have it in a separate take. I just want the impact of the lights inside of on all of those elements. So the easiest way is just to have the auto take, go inside of the cloner itself, deactivate everything, so it won't be seen, and I can just select the lights and make them visible on that. And now I have the light impacts of those parrots inside of that. If I find that my light is way too bright, I can just once again double click on it and just modify anything that I need. For example, I'm going to put a fall off, inverse square. Of course, it's way too big, so just, I think 100 would be fine. Once again, way too big. And just to be sure, I'm going to change that to instance. And the fact of changing my cloner to instance will give me that render of all the lights at the same time. So once again, selecting on my light, changing maybe the impact. Right now I'm doing it on a standard render, so it's faster for me to show you, but what we did was using an Arnold light and making each of those takes named differently. So that's the only thing that we did separately. I will show you after that on the After Effects file. But I made my light, which is fine. And what I can do now is just going back to my main render, and I know for a fact that I will want to have some small tracer behind all of those parrots. So that's, once again, super easy to do. I'm really working on the middle wing right now, but as soon as I know that my project is working, I can just do another spline for that bottom wing and that right wing, and I will have everything already set up for that. So let's go. I want to have a tracer, so I'm gonna select my cloner. I'm gonna add right here a tracer. And what that tracer is gonna do is it's gonna create lines out of my parrots. So that's super nice. I don't want them to be all the way though. But for the sake of that presentation, it's going to be way more than enough. I'm going to put that in B-spline. So let's check how it looks. The issue that I have right now is that since they are created over there and moving here, it's creating that line right here. I can get rid of that super easily also. But it's creating the line that I want. And then inside of that tracer, on top of that tracer, we'll have a sweep curve. The tracer is going to be this, and I'm going to add a simple circle inside of it. So whoop. And if I'm going out of here, that's creating those small lines behind it. And inside of my sweep, I can just add a cap, fill a cap at the end with more steps and maybe a bigger thing. And I can also work with the scale of it being wider at the beginning and smaller at the end. So that's it so far. Since I realized that I have an issue with my tracer, I'm just gonna deactivate my tracer and everything. And I'm gonna change the way my cloner is done by just not having him going over minus, but I'm just gonna put from 0 to 100. And I'm gonna animate the end of my group. So they arrive all together, that's fine. But at the beginning, maybe they start like this in the middle, and in the beginning, they are way more closer from each other. So now they are all starting from the beginning, and they are all normally ending that. Same problem right here. I'm not gonna offset them completely, and I'm gonna put a keyframe right here for the end, and I'm gonna put them back right there. So they're never going back over here, and then all I gotta do is being sure that my end is at the right position, so it's making them all disappear as it needs to be. And that's good. So now if I activate back my sweep, you will see that the sweep is created from the beginning and it's following them. So once again, I'm gonna put that sweep in my middle wing and activate a new take, a new child take that I'm gonna call tracer. And once again, I'm gonna go back inside of my camera to be sure that I'm rendering the right thing. I don't see the parrots right now. I'm just gonna go further to be sure that I'm not rendering them also. So right now, everything is here. I can see those parrots, I don't want them. So once again, I can just check if my auto take is still on and get rid of the cloner. So right now it's still creating the swipe, but I won't see the parrots themselves. And I also don't need the building. What we did is that we added one really simple material in Luminance and we used that as a gradient. I can create it right away. New material, Luminance, gradient that's going in vertical axis. I think vertical, I'm gonna try. Let me see closer. And you see right now what you are creating is you are creating a line which is in one color at the beginning. You can just invert the gradient. And in After Effects, you will be able super simply to just output the right color that you want. I try to work as much as I can in black and white, so it's way easier in After to redo everything. Just to be sure also, I'm gonna validate the right camera for all of my renders. And right now I can also just try to do not the middle wing, so I'm gonna go back in main, but I'm gonna try to do the right wing. Really easy, since everything is working. I just have to rename that. I'm gonna go here from my camera point of view. I'm gonna create a new spline, activate my track, bam, 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 bam. That's it. It's the right spline. As we did before, I'm just gonna put that inside of my camera, activate the enable modification axis and change the coordinates of my spline to be 0, 0, 0. Deactivate that, going back in the right folder. It's really just now the same process going over and over again. So I'm really going fast with this, but I think you get the point. And now I can update my parrot to not use the middle spline, but the right spline. And those follow spline to use the same one. So now the issue is that the sweep is using still the same, I think. The tracer is using the cloner parrot, but I'm not sure if it's the right one. So once again, the best way is to rename that parrot right, just to be sure that you are referencing the right object every time. And now, bada bim, bada bam, you already have everything set up for your other part of your project. And since your takes are done the right way, you will only render the tracer here. You will only render the parrot here. I just need to check. Yeah, I forgot to turn off the tracers. So whoop, 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 and whoop, 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 whoop. So right now you only render the parrot inside of the parrot. You only render the lights inside of the lights. Once again, get rid of everything else. And since everything is already set up, I could just output all my files one by one, all my take one by one, and go inside of After Effects to comp. So that's the different type of take that we rendered from the project. I'm gonna show that to you. The first one is the beauty of the parrots. Of course, that's what we were doing all together. You can see right now that those parrots are actually super small when you render them at the right size, and it's kind of complicated to see them properly inside of After Effects. Fun fact, I worked half of the project with the parrot facing the wrong direction, and we just realized that at the end of the project. But it worked, and I just had to re-render that specific take. Then after that, what we can do is what I showed you right before. We can do a quick tracer out of that and have all those lines being created out of the parrot, so it's gonna help me for one transition inside of the project itself. We then have a super simple and effective X-particle simulation in which we just use the feather to create particles, and we just simulate that for all of the systems. And it's creating some kind of, we are using that to create some kind of smoke effect at the end, honestly. Then what we can do is just using everything that we've done so far as a reference and go in After Effects and create something with particular. So just to show that to you. So if we jump in After Effects, we can see that all that we use right now is just a render of the tracer to have a reference. And I just animated some lights that I named emitter, following the right path for all of the renders that we do. And it's really a simple setup of particular that is just emitting from the lights and kind of doing some glitter animation out of that. It's just so on site we don't rely only on Cinema 4D, and we can make some quick edit for those big and simple effects instead of having to recalculate a cache from X-particle. Once all of that is done, we can jump in Arnold this time and render light by light everything that we've done. The idea behind that is that if I render every light separately, I will be able to have the impact of the right wing parrots, even if they are impacting on, for example, the kind of X shape behind it. So I'm trying to have as much control as I can, because if I need to make modification on site, I won't be able to re-render all those lights paths because of the fact that I will be in Hong Kong with only a few computers, and that's what we do over there. We try to build our file to be as flexible as possible in comp, just because when we go in integration, which is the moment in which we deliver the project on site, we don't have the same amount of render power that we have when we work in Montreal. So for example, on that project, we were 3 motion designers on site, and we had a render farm of, I think, 2 or 3 machines on top of that. So it's not enough to re-render all of that. But that's it for the render pass itself. It's already a lot of small stuff, and combined together we can have a way more complicated file in which all of those small elements that really are not complicated to make one by one are just mashed up together with a lot of color correction to create that kind of render. So you can now see that's at almost the end of the transformation. All those parrots are creating lights behind them, and the light impact of the parrots is on the building with the right texture of the animal behind it. And it's just having all of those together that's making that work. If I'm going back to the idea of using immigration and using the render token and the take system all together, that's a good example. Right now you have all the render passes for the light. It's just that just put all on top of each other in add mode in After Effects. And as you can see from my naming convention, it's a quarter res render. So if I'm looking at the scale, right now I already applied that same formula that you've seen before. And it's really a quarter res render that we did on Arnold, just to see if everything was working fine. We could work with that. And while we worked with that, we were able to output, for example, the middle, the half res render. So if I'm selecting my immigration folder, the right folder itself, it's still a mess because there are lots of files right now seen by that element. But if I'm just searching for my half res render, because I know exactly the naming convention, I'm able to select the same amount of render on my project management and the same amount of render inside of my immigration folder. And if I click that button, preview file match, you see that everything is gonna be, because of the fact it's named the same way, egg 1 version 1 quarter res is gonna be replaced by egg 1 version 1 but half res. And it's gonna do it for everything now. So I got what? I got 8 renders that I'm just gonna simply replace by one click of a button. And it's doing it automatically everywhere in my project. And because of the fact that right now it's just this, everything is already at the right size because of my formula. And right now I received a message from my technical director telling me that everything is done for the full res render. I can just select everything that is full res, replace it, and it's gonna replace everything altogether. So that's super fast. That's giving me the opportunity to be sure that everything is at the right place. I can just check if everything with that replace preview, I can check everything, and now everything is now at 100% full resolution. I'm doing this not because I'm lazy, but because if we look at what we've done before, it's really a lot of different render that are gonna be used. And if I'm modifying the source itself, instead of trying to change one by one, layer by layer inside of my project, I'm really avoiding the struggle of checking stuff. Right now I know that all my lights are changed and they are gonna be updated in all the source that I'm using them and on all the output also. So that's a good way to simplify your workflow, is just to be sure that you are not creating yourself problem. One example that I have regarding that project is that when we arrived on site with the director, Bruno Ribeiro, that made that project possible, we realized that the parrots were so huge compared to the size that we thought, that we just needed to change the size of the parrot, I think, to reduce them by 5 times. So I just took a look of what I needed to render. I just need to render the parrots and the simulation of the particle that were done in Xparticle, and I could just render those specific takes, which makes the modification way faster, and we could see that new version of the render the night after that on the building itself. So if you manage to make your file easy to understand to everybody and also easy to modify for you, it's gonna save you a lot of time at the end of the project to be sure that you can be way faster to modify things. I just looked at the clock and I think it's the right moment right now to just say congratulations to everybody that worked on that project. I'm the one in front of the camera right now, but as I said before, it's a team of motion designers, a team of designers, and also all of the people behind the wheels, like the coordinator, the producer, the director, the creative director. It's really an amazing team that made that project possible, and I think it's the right moment to tell them thank you for all the work that everybody did on that project. I will also say a huge thank you to Matthias for giving me the chance to present to you all of that, and I hope that you liked it as much as I like making that presentation for you. If you have questions regarding what I did today, don't hesitate to ask me on social media. You have my Twitter handle, and I think it's the same everywhere. So if you see me somewhere, don't hesitate to ask me that question. Also, if you are a more specific work-driven question, don't hesitate to ask directly to the social media of Moen Factory that are right now on the screen. Once again, thank you for listening to all of that, and I hope to see you in the next presentation. Bye!